everybody. Craig Sherwood here again with Bob Hart for another edition, our second edition, actually, of Coach's Corner. Coach, how you doing?
I'm great. I feel like a real veteran now that I've gone to two of these situations. It's great.
Yeah, it's funny. We get a lot of comments, but one comment came in saying, I love listening to two grumpy old men talk. So we could call it the Grumpy Old Man podcast, but we'll stay with Coach's Corner because I think we have a lot of knowledge and experience in the area. So how's your couple of weeks been? How's your team doing right now?
Pretty solid. We work hard every day. They're good guys, and we are a work in progress like every year. You try to lay the foundation and then hopefully get better as you go along every day. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that, every year, every team has its own new personality. Some years you might be a power team or a speed team, and you have to learn the personality of that team. So, but a week from tomorrow, which actually is November 9th, you guys, and once again, one of the things I really admire about how you run a program and what you do, just not on the field, but in development of players, is you're going to have a veterans appreciation ceremony, I guess you would call it, before your Winter League game next Thursday on the 9th. I get around 5:30 at the Burbank High School's field, baseball field. So why don't you tell us a little about what you guys have planned for that?
We just find it's a great opportunity to acknowledge and recognize those guys. I have a great booster club who puts a ton of work in and kind of, implements the idea. So I give a lot of credit to them. And obviously, we enjoy teaching the boys the benefit of, honoring those before us, that are kind of setting the way for us. So it's just a win-win. It's a great thing. And we played Grace Brethren that night. They're a solid program. So it's a great night to come out, honor our guys and watch some baseball.
I think that people don't, I know you always take your team over to the ceremonies in Cambridge Park, too, year after year.
We do. We're planning on doing that again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, they don't appreciate it right now as players, because they're at that age, But I think they start getting an understanding of what that's all about and what that means and everything. They don't get by, staying at home playing a video game because it's a holiday,
Yeah, and I'm fortunate this year in particular because we have a culture of parents that lead the way in that regard as well. So I don't get a lot of kickback from kids. I mean, they're willing to go, and I think they see the benefit of it because, they have parents that kind of show them the value of it and kind of what it means. So it's good.
And I think you recently did another event also, didn't you?
We have done, we did a thing at Harvard Westlake. It was veterans, kind of almost like an Olympic thing, activities, athletics, and kind of doing that thing. We had some kids go there and volunteer. Again, teaching them to give back is a good thing. I mean, as coaches, we do it, right? We've been doing it for years. So I think it's great for them. I think it gives them a better slice of life perspective, as to what's really important. And so, yeah, it's great.
Well, there's nothing like community, nothing like it at all.
Absolutely.
Well, this is our second show, but it's going to be our first guest.
Yes.
So we're pretty excited about that. And tonight's guest is somebody who I've actually known just about forever. I think we started each other. We found each other's friends back in, I think, third grade at Stevenson Elementary School. And I've remained friends ever since and have shared many experiences over the years. And if anybody is entrenched in the Burbank sports scene, if anybody is, in fact, it's funny, our photographer, Ross Benson, has photographed every fireman, every cop at their graduation, then their retirements and been around. Well, our guest is a kind of person that not only has coached these kids and probably coached every kid in the city, but now he's coaching their kids. So our guest today is Mike Graceffo. Mike, good to have you on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I'd like to say thank you to Craig and Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, it's good to have you here. Everybody's a little nervous to first get behind the mic a little bit, but you lose. If anybody can talk, it's Mike Graceffo. So Mike, give us, as though I know it if anybody else, but why don't you give us your background, starting, when you kind of started to, get involved in sports and your sports background, and then what got you into coaching?
Well, I had actually gotten hired with the city of Burbank when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school at Burroughs, and I was playing baseball at Burroughs. And Gordy Martin, who was in charge of the Burbank sports office
Gordy Martin
at the time, he literally showed up to our practice at Burroughs and said he was looking for people to coach a baseball team. He needed coaches. And I was, I believe, 17 at the time, 17 or 18. And like I said, I had just gotten hired with Park and Rec. I wasn't working in the sports division. I was working in the recreation side, but I knew Gordy. And I believe I talked to somebody by the name of Craig Sherwood. And I said, hey, why don't we take a baseball team? And literally, Craig and I wound up
What
taking
was I
this
getting
baseball
into?
team. Uh, I'll never forget the name of the team. We were the Giamella's Indians because of Burroughs. We did not have baseball pants. We did not have enough
Nope.
money for baseball pants. Our kids literally wore jeans
Yeah.
to their games. We had a catcher named Rusty. We had a pitcher by the name of Juan Luna. We had a great team. I don't know if Craig and I really knew what we were doing,
And how
but
did we do that team?
we were good enough to win the
Yes,
championship.
we did.
And literally, that's how I got started in the coaching.
Yep.
Did Juan Luna have that big 12-6 curve?
Oh yeah,
Juan Luna had the
yes.
big afro, and he had the big curveball.
That's great.
Yeah, we rode that curveball all the
Yeah.
way to the
And-
title that year.
And literally, that's what I still use that team as an example now. I tell my kids, it doesn't matter how well you're dressed and what kind of uniforms you have. It's what you got in your heart, you know.
Absolutely.
And that was our first experience coaching, and we won the championship. And I thought, hey, this is fun.
Yeah.
we actually coached that team back in the end of our junior year of high school.
Yeah.
And then the next year we went to Burroughs, and some of those players were going to Burroughs with us.
Right,
You know, we
right.
saw one in the hallways
It
and
was
everything
pretty
else.
scary. We're 1 year older than the kids I believe we were coaching.
Yep.
Yeah, similar thing happened at when I was at Burroughs with Mark Carlson, and I took a team, and it was Dave Strasser and Brent Durnis and all those guys.
Yeah.
And we were like 1 year, we were seniors, I think, in high school, and all of a sudden we're coaching an 8th, 9th grade team. Gets in your blood, right?
No, once you get the you get the feeling for it, and it's like, I like this.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we started off with the older kids, and it just,
Yeah.
I mean, they're able to execute kind of what we wanted to do, and I don't
Right.
think we could have related as 6 and 7-year-olds back then at
No,
all.
exactly.
You would have probably yell, come on, they would have started crying or something,
Right.
So, no, the good times. That's how we started off. And I know we both coached we coached Tap Minor for years, and we both coached
Burbank, Babe Ruth,
Babe Ruth, and we also did flag football. We did
basketball.
basketball. We did everything, and I did a lot of officiating in the city.
Yeah.
And I mean, guys, it's been 10 years every night of the week doing something
Yeah, no.
for Burbank Park and Rec at that time until I
Exactly.
started getting my high school wings under me.
Mike put up with me for years at Verdugo Park with my shenanigans and all my guys. We played rough 3-on-3, so he showed the patience of a saint. It worked well for you in coaching.
Well, I think back then you're just glad guys came to the gym and stuff, weren't
Yeah,
you?
I was a work trainee, just starting out with the city, and I'd work Verdugo Park. I work evenings. I'd work weekends. I worked roller skating at Olive Park. They had it every Friday and Saturday night. We had a makeshift teen center where the old Olive Stadium was.
I think they should name
And,
that park after you. You and Mickey.
They're naming it after all kinds of people.
Yeah, I guess they named it after.
George Izay.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, they do name things after people,
Yeah.
and it's the sad thing about that is I don't think most people know who these people even are.
Right.
Yeah, we had
know?
this old teen center I was working. It was upstairs in the old behind Olive Number One when they had Olive Diamond Number One, and it was the most rundown place. We had these couches
Yeah.
up there that
It was
somebody
it was the old
donated.
stadium.
Yeah, it was
St.
the
Louis
old
Cardinals
Olive
played.
Stadium.
Yeah.
And we had
It was
ping
the
pong
Browns.
table.
Browns.
We had a pool table with holes in it. We had couches, a broken TV. But you know what? I was getting 50 to 60 teens a night at that place.
Yep.
And the kids loved it because they called it their own.
It gets them busy,
Yeah.
man. That's the thing people don't understand about investing in a community is that there's a residual benefit, and that benefit far outweighs the immediate to the eye.
Exactly.
It gets people doing things that they should be doing rather than things they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
Yeah, and there was really nothing else for the teen. We all knew growing up in Burbank that if you're a teenager in Burbank, streets were open 9 o'clock and there's nothing to do.
Right.
Back then, there were no movie theaters even,
Right.
Yeah.
so there was nothing for the teenage crowd, and we were a forgotten, demographic.
Yeah.
No,
I think
for sure.
sports saved a lot of people's lives, and
Oh, yeah.
in that regard,
Right, which is kind of what this is all about right now. What we're
Yeah,
talking
there were no
about.
video games. There's no cell phones. I mean,
And I think kids were a lot better at managing their own time in those days in terms of, whether that's going out and playing over the line for 4 hours or Being at Verdugo Park for 4 hours every
Right.
day, Sundays included.
I
You know?
tell my players now, and they don't. I don't think they believe me. They start laughing at me.
Yeah.
But I tell them, I go back in the day. We didn't have cell phones. You know, we didn't have video games or computers or iPads
Or
or
orchestrated games.
and
Everything
no,
wasn't
and
a ref and a parent
right.
and
And
an
it was
audience.
basically tell mom and dad, hey, I'll see you later, mom. I'm going to so and so's house, or I'm going to the park.
Be home by
Be
dark.
home before dark.
Exactly.
And that was
Yeah.
literally it. And we would be on our bikes with our skateboards, going to the parks, going to our friends' houses, whatever.
Yep.
And we would literally play all day from morning till night.
Sometimes I wonder if that's not a byproduct of, just an overall lack of trust in society,
Yeah.
where parents aren't comfortable just turning their kids loose
No.
and saying, "Hey, you're gonna ride to the beach." What? We used
No.
to do that on a 1-speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
all
took
the way
the
over to
bus.
Salvador. Yeah.
Greg and
Yeah,
I
right.
took the bus to Dodger Stadium.
We used to ride our
sure.
bikes to Dodger
We
Stadium.
rode our
occasionally.
bikes to
We
Dodger
shouldn't
Stadium.
Stingray.
Yeah.
And we would lock them up at the 76 Union gas station up there.
We may not be grumpy, but we're old.
Yeah,
I know we're showing our age right now, right? But no, it was a different time, and
For sure.
and in fairness to the kids now, unfortunately, it's a different world.
It is.
It's I hate to say that, but it is. It's
Yeah.
back in the day when we were growing up, we didn't have a lot of the issues that these kids are facing now.
And I think every generation says that, because if you talk to your grandparents, they probably tell you the same thing when you were growing up, that life was simpler. It's more of the Waltons than
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
happy
and
days.
also our video game that instead of staying at home playing a video game, we went out and played a game actually, and
Right.
and got together. Our summertime.
Yeah.
When we as kids we'd be at Stevenson for the summer, and then we'd challenge other parks to over the line games and ride our bikes over to that park.
When I worked at Verdugo Park, we literally had a sacket league.
Yep.
For those that don't know,
Sacket, what a great sport.
indoor baseball with a plastic bat and ball. And then they had what's called a sacket. It was a net, and you could order it. It was literally called sacket. And we would play a regular baseball game in the gym. And we had a league.
Yep.
All the parks had one, and it was awesome.
Yep.
And I remember when Terry Scott, who's a Burbank legend in his own right, he worked at Vicroy Park. I was working at Verdugo. He'd call me up and say, hey, coach, you got 9, 10 kids want to come over to Vicroy Park and play flag football or play catch of the flag.
Yep.
And then what we did, we'd have the kids run into the office, call mom, dad, tell them you're going to Vicroy.
Yep.
And that was it,
Yep.
and we would go there and we'd play other parks and other schools. And I mean, it was such a great time.
Yep.
It was such a great time.
A little simpler,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of they say back in the day, but something can be said for that. The foundation years. I mean, so when was it that you kind of decided that you kind of wanted to make sports and everything kind of a way of life?
I mean, I've loved sports, my whole life. I mean, growing up as a kid, I was born in Burbank. My mom and my aunts and my dad, and my uncles and everybody, they were born back east. But I was born here in Burbank. I had an identical twin brother. Unfortunately, died at 2 years old of pneumonia. And we were both born at St. Joe's.
Boy, could you imagine 2 microcephals?
That's
out
what
there?
everybody
Can you
says.
imagine that?
That's what everybody says. But anyway, so my uncles, my dad, they all told me stories, especially my uncles, of growing up in New York, and they weren't the greatest influence. They were telling me, "Oh, we'd cut school and go to Yankee Stadium and sit behind Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle." So people always say, "Oh, you're from New York, that's why you like the Yankees," and I'm really not. But my family was. My mom loved Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle. Would tell me stories. My uncles and my aunts, and they lived in Long Island. I was only 5 or 6 years old when I lived in New York, but I was born here. We went back there, and then we came back to California, and I've lived here my whole life. So I was only living in New York for about 2, 3 years as a kid, little kid. But that's how I grew up liking the Yankees and liking, baseball. And then my uncle out here had an Italian Alfa Romeo. He'd pick me up on Saturdays and Sundays, and he'd take me in the 2-seat car. And I was like 11 or 12 years old, and he would drive me to Palm Springs to see the Angels play spring training. So I loved baseball. I mean, that's how I totally got into baseball. And then I started playing it, obviously, and things. But I loved sports as a kid, all kinds of sports. And then, played a little bit of high school ball and stuff. And then, started coaching, like I said, coaching in high school with you. And I know we had some awesome experiences, awesome teams. We, along with, I guess, a guy named Bob Myers, if I recall.
Bob Myers, yeah, I remember Bob
He
Myers.
started Burbank Babe Ruth baseball, along with Bob. He's gonna be mad at me. He's the ex-mayor. Oh God,
The ex-mayor.
the ex-mayor. You call him whenever there's an issue, and he'll go drive out and check on it.
Oh, Bob Kramer.
Bob Kramer. I'm sorry, Bob Kramer, along with Bob.
Right, he's
They
now he's the ombudsman of Burbank.
exactly.
He's actually his
But-
grandson is in our program.
Yeah, but Bob Kramer. Yeah, Dylan.
No, his other
Oh.
Tanner.
Oh, Tanner. Okay,
Yeah.
his younger one. Yeah, but no, Bob Kramer and Bob Meyer, those guys were great. I mean, and along with yourself and myself and, 4 or 5 others, we started that Burbank Babe Ruth program. And we had some really good teams. I mean, we would compete. I think Craig and I, every year, along with Scott Isaacson, would battle for championships. And it got pretty heated sometimes, And but I tell you what, it got our kids ready. And we would go into that Babe Ruth tournament. I remember we were 1 game away from beating Glendale, going to Hawaii, if I recall.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I felt like we got those kids ready. I mean, when they went to Burbank High or Burroughs or wherever they were going to go, they
And
were,
our league was so small compared to those leagues.
no, and we only had 4 teams in Burbank Babe
Yeah.
Ruth. But our kids were so ready by the time they got to high school, and you can just look at the track record of the kids that we had. I think Craig's team and my team was like an all-star team for Burroughs and Burbank for a long time.
Yeah, when I get kids, I can instantaneously tell what level of coaching they've had, so that I can coach from here to the top rather than revisiting stuff that should have been done in 4th,
No,
5th
exactly.
grade.
It's also funny that when we put a kid in the all-star team, he usually belonged on it. I mean, now once you become a high school coach and then you get these parents to call you and they say, well, my kid was on the all-star team the last 4 years. Why is he not starting? I go, well, and who was his coach then? He goes, well, I was his coach. Of course. Well, why is the kid in the all-star team,
Yeah.
I mean, do parents even realize what they're saying or what that means,
And the scary thing was at that time too, Craig and I were probably 20, in our early 20s. I mean, just think if we knew then what we probably know even 15, 20 years ago,
Sure.
how good those teams could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a great
but
job.
as the
considering-
players developed, we were developing too.
Exactly.
sure.
We were learning the game,
Yeah.
and we learned. I learn from my kids every day.
I agree.
I still, at my age, I learn every day
Yep.
from my players, and I tell them that.
Absolutely. And I think in baseball, you tend to see almost every game you see something you didn't expect or you haven't seen before
Right.
in one
No.
way or the other. So that's to
Exactly.
me, that's what makes it so interesting.
That's what makes sports in general so
sure.
interesting. You'll see something you've never seen before,
Yep.
or experience something, and
Yep.
I mean, you might watch 200 games and never see anything, and all of a sudden that one game, it happens, and you're saying, "Wow!" Kirk gets it hit that home run. I mean,
Yep.
everybody knows where they were when that happened.
Yeah, I was at the Kenny G concert. Unfortunately, my wife had gotten tickets, and I had an opportunity to go to the World Series, but she had a front row seat to Kenny G. It's embarrassing to say that I went to the Kenny G concert, and they announced it at the concert. So,
Wow.
so I don't live that one. I don't let her live that.
I
down.
got to honestly say, I was sitting on Loge at that game. The late Russ Johnson and his 2 sons invited me. They were obviously Dodger fans. Knowing me, I was rooting for Oakland. I was celebrating. They were all mad at me. Kirk Gibson comes up with 2 outs and hits that home run. I literally sat with my head in my hands. And
I think the big thing with sports for me is, and you guys probably agree, it's the element of like being in something that puts the rest of the world away.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how I present it to my players. It becomes a sanctuary of sort.
Absolutely.
It's a safe spot. It's a place where, your boys are pulling for you and you're pulling for your guys and you're all rowing the boat in one direction and there's no distractions. And, from that standpoint, it was a great escape for a pretty rough childhood that I had. But it was a great escape. It was a great, productive one, rather than falling into the wrong path or whatever it might be. So I see the value in so much in the peripheral of sports, not necessarily the score of the game, because, and you guys know this too, you remember the guys you played with more than you remember the score of the biggest game of your life, probably.
Absolutely.
So it's about connection, and that's such a huge part of it. And that's why, things like the veterans have a peripheral benefit for the program. Team dinners and stuff. It's not, they don't need food. They can get food, but getting food together, that type of stuff, really kind of builds the goodness of the whole thing. You know what I mean?
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the things you witness over there. We were talking before we came on the air tonight that think about the things you've seen in person. Kirk Gibson's home run. You and I were both at the Super Bowl 7.
That's right.
back at the Coliseum, and we were there when Miami went undefeated. So every year when those guys raise their glass to when every team loses, I always have that memory of
Me too.
being there at the Coliseum and
You can see what I'm wearing right now.
Yeah.
Always been a Dolphin fan.
And running up to after the game, running on the field, running up where Don Shula is being interviewed and everything, and there was no security back then.
I
really,
tell people those stories, and nobody believes me.
Zonka and Kick.
I tell people those stories.
My favorite receiver was on that team, Paul Warfield.
There you go.
Gary Premium, right?
Yeah.
Giving the Washington their touchdown, 14-7.
Great arm.
Yeah. Bob Greasy.
Bob Greasy.
They're good teams, but the things we've seen over the years, and the games we've been to and everything. So
Nick
it's
Bonacani.
amazing. Well, let's move on a little bit now. Okay, so now we've got your kind of your background stuff and who you are. Well, believe me, we don't have enough time in a week to go over your background and all the things you've done. But let's talk a little about, because our podcast is not about just events. It's more the psychology of sports a little bit too. So kind of the question we have for you that, Bob and I kind of throw around a lot is, let's talk about the evolution of players over the years. How have players, from the time we started out back in the day in the 70s to now in the 2020s, how do you think the players themselves have changed in their mentality? Not in the ability, but just in their mentality and their work ethic and how they go about their presence. So how do you feel it's changed?
The biggest thing I see, it's the kids still have the desire. The kids still want to win. The kids still want to learn. What I see is the biggest difference is they're overcommitted. It used to be you play baseball season's done, you go to basketball season's done, you go to flag football. Now I've got kids literally on my teams that are playing 3 sports currently. I mean, they're playing soccer, basketball, football. And I think it's so hard for these kids because they want to be loyal. They want to be at every practice and every game, but they're on multiple teams, multiple sports. There's year-round baseball now. There's year-round basketball. There's club basketball. There's spring football now, even for flag football kids, So that's the biggest thing I see is that, these kids they're being pulled in so many different directions. It's hard for them to just, just to be committed to that football team or that baseball team. Well, coach, I'll be there, but I've got to leave early, or I'm coming late, or I'm sorry I can't be there today because I got a baseball game or I got a football practice, or So as a coach, I have to change with the times too. If I don't, if I hold to my principles and say you have to be at every game and every practice or you're not going to play, I probably would lose half my team.
Right. But what I wonder if they realize though what happens when they don't show up to a practice and they play a key role on the team.
Yeah. Well,
and then that makes it difficult now for everybody.
Right. That's the biggest thing is I think trying to get that across. To be quite honest, not only the kids but to the parents. That when your son or your daughter miss a practice, it affects the whole team.
Okay, that's the second part of my question is, what about the evolution of the parents over the last 40, 50 years? How do you think that's changed also?
Well, I think, to be quite honest, I think it's a rougher world now than it was back in the day, in fairness to parents. And, I think there's, a lot of parents have to work more hours to put food on the table and clothes on their children, pay their rent and things. I think it's a harder time right now. I think it's a lot different world now. Back when we first started coaching and when I was a player, my mom said, okay, go to practice. I'll pick you up. Now the parents won't let their kid walk or ride their bike for the most part to practices. They're either too far or they're afraid. And you can't blame them. It's a different world now.
Well, I think it's a different world. But at what point do you also have to kind of send your kid out there so he gets some real world experience too?
No,
I don't think they're getting the experience that you and I had back in the day. Yeah, yes, it's a rougher world, no doubt. But we still do live in Burbank. We don't live in South Central or something. So I think that every little more.
Yeah, I like I said, I think it's hard. I know a lot of, like I said, parents work. some work multiple jobs. Some, they have, they're picking up one kid from school, dropping the other one off at a practice. And again, being that there's these year-round sports, a lot of these families have multiple kids, multiple sports. They're also cheerleading, or they're in dance, or they're in jujitsu or karate or tutoring. They're being tutored. I mean, there's just so many things that we deal with.
Do you think the kids are playing the sports and stuff they want to play, or that their parents they're playing kind of what their parents want them to do also?
I mean, I think personally, I think the kids that I coach, I think they enjoy playing the different sports. I mean, I have some kids that are just total baseball players and they love it, but yet they want to play for the school. They
Sure.
want to play football or basketball. And so, their parents are, cool enough to make it work, and we do the best we can. But again, you have to be fluctuating. Like what I do now is I basically say, okay, 50-50. If you're going to play baseball and you're playing basketball for me, okay, you have to miss one of my practices during the week to go to baseball. I have no problem with that.
Right.
But then the next time there's a conflict, come to my practice,
Right.
And so I try to be upfront with the parents and the kids. I try to be fair, and for the most part, I've made it work, and
Yeah.
to the parents' credit, they've made it work.
Part of that has to do with education in terms of going to college and what it costs. So a lot of people
Right.
have a real aspiration to gain that scholarship, and they feel like, by orchestrating, private instruction or travel ball, they're going to get exposure, they're going to get looks.
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with the fact that, it costs so much money to go to college, unless you want to go into debt with student loan
Right.
for the rest
Right.
of your life. I think there's something to be said for that. Back in the day, it was $1,500 a year to go to school, and
Sure. No,
now it's
exactly.
$50,000 depending
No,
upon what school
and
you
that's
go
what
to.
I'm saying. And you brought up a good point. Back in the day, we didn't have quarterback coaches.
No,
These kids weren't paying somebody $40 an hour to teach them how to dribble a basketball. But yet, I guarantee you, a lot of my players, and kids, I talk to coaches every day. These kids are going to private trainers in all kinds of sports,
yeah, yeah,
swimming, water polo, cross country, track, how to
yeah.
run. I mean,
Everyone's trying to get an edge.
yeah, and they're paying good money
Sure.
to send these kids to
And
these.
what's sad about that is the private coach will then say, "Wow, you're the best. I can't believe you're not starting at this position. I can't believe you're not doing this or doing that." You know, and just feeding the kid and the parents full of, I think, false praise. So now the parent is now questioning the coach. Well, this guy says my kid should be starting.
Yeah.
When all the coach wants is, well, you're one of the best I've ever had. By the way, what time next week? And I need your check.
No,
And that's the whole idea. Is that keep praising him. He'll come back every week
sure.
and keep paying that money.
I see it at the high school level, especially, and I'm sure Bob, you deal with that. I mean, I
Sure.
remember when I coached with you a couple years ago at Burbank, we had, we would tell the kids how to hold the bat and how to do something, and they said, "Well, my hitting coach told me to do it this way," and
Yep.
and that's the frustration. Again, I'm not saying that I'm a perfect coach. I mean, I want my players to be open minded, and hey, I tell them, you might learn something from somebody else. You might learn something
Absolutely.
from me, so I have no problem with that. But when the kid basically won't try any other way because his, coach that he's paying $50 an hour to go to is telling, and which I get, I understand,
Yeah, I'm always looking for collaboration from those coaches
Exactly.
so that we can be on the same page.
Right.
I'm willing to learn anything, and I want my kids exposed to multiple things, but at the same time, I don't see those guys show up to the games, and I don't see that level of commitment for those guys, because game situations are much different than the cage.
No, you're right.
There's cage hitters and there's gamers. So, my contention has always been that, if you're going to do that, then don't you want to see the full body of work and the results of your work? I mean, if you're putting in all this time with kids, a day, 2 days a week for 5 years, wouldn't you be interested in the biggest game of the year,
you
in the
wanna
playoff
be there
game
and
or
watch
whatever it
it,
might
yeah.
be?
Yeah,
So,
I know in baseball, the guy who puts it in a pitching machine, it goes right down the middle, and the kid swings at a time pitch. He's the greatest. All of a sudden, in a game, a guy throws a 2-2 fastball in the corner or a slider or something. The kid takes it for a called strike. Well, yeah, but the machine didn't do that to me.
right. Yeah, and I think it goes to navigation too. I think kids struggle in some ways navigating through life because they run into an orchestrated situation all the time. They're always, it's always it's an umpire, it's the audience, it's the parents, it's this stage all the time, instead of like just going out and playing over the line for 3 hours
Yeah.
with your boys,
No,
and
it's
then
a lot more
stopping at
fun.
Ralph's on the way home and getting some angel
It's a
food
lot
cake,
more
or
complicated now.
whatever
I
it
mean,
might be.
just getting back to, Craig, what you had asked me at the start. The biggest difference I see too is I remember literally coming, getting to the field, like, let's say 20 minutes before practice. I remember distinctly baseball. We used to practice at Burroughs. They'd let us practice there for our Babe Ruth teams. I remember getting to the field, and there was Mike Reynolds and Bob Haynes already there. I said, guys, what are you doing? Practice isn't for another 20 minutes. Coach, we wanted to get in some extra work. I mean, and again, in fairness to the kids now, those kids were only playing baseball then. There was no other sport going on.
Right.
So they could focus on that.
Yep.
Now you don't have that because these poor kids are, they're coming to my practice and then they're having to leave to go straight to soccer or to straight
Yep.
to basketball or,
Yeah.
and so, but that's the big difference I see. Back in the day, and again, I'm not trying to sound old or old-fashioned or whatever, but
We always will.
it's true. I mean, back in those days, the kids were focusing on one sport at a time.
Hmm.
They would play baseball, and then when baseball was done, they would take that break and they would go play football.
Yeah.
And they'd go play basketball.
That kind of goes back to the money thing too, because there's all these leagues. Well, people are making money on those leagues. I mean, you're paying. It's a little bit of commerce within itself.
For sure.
Referees are getting paid. You're paying for gym facilities or whatever it is.
Right.
So, and then travel ball becomes $200 or $300 a month, and
Yeah. No.
so a lot of the times I think parents probably have kind of created that that big stage when it's maybe not so,
Right.
especially young, necessary.
No, I agree.
Early on.
Well, and you can't blame the parent once they sign up this kid. Like you say, they're paying $300 to put this kid in travel ball.
Yep.
Hey, you're going to travel ball. I'm paying $300. So,
Right.
I understand. Whereas,
Right.
Our little flag football team, park and rec teams, you're paying $25 or $75 or
Sure.
whatever. There's a big difference there.
Yep.
So I understand.
Yep.
Well, let's move the conversation a little farther then. What about nowadays? It's the trophy generation. Every kid has to be recognized. Every kid needs to receive a trophy. We can't discriminate. We can't give, they have to all feel included, all those things. And I'm finding that the 20-somethings now are the first part of what I call the trophy generation, where everything, it has to be inclusive. I just saw recently that there's a number of, I guess, Harvard graduates in law who were accepted at law schools who said, well, this war with, Israel and Gaza, they need to work it out. Gaza, it shouldn't be. And these law firms said, we're rescinding your invitation. We don't want you working. This is not it's right and wrong sometimes. And I think that from the trophy generation. So have you had experiences now with players and especially parents now who need to feel inclusive about everything?
Yeah, especially at the younger levels. When the kids are younger, I think I see more of that at that age. I think, to be quite honest, too, I think COVID has really affected that. And those kids not going to school for 2 years, and us doing, homeschooling. I mean,
right. They're actually saying now that the COVID generation, they're calling it, has been just screwed up completely.
Yeah.
But how did we know that back then? We were trying to protect everybody.
Yeah.
We didn't realize the kids really didn't get it or that seriously.
No template,
Yeah.
No
I mean,
template.
how would you know? So I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I think that COVID, along with, like you said, the generation of everybody needs to get something, and it's made it tough. It's made it I'll be quite honest. I'm an athletic director and at a school, and I worked for Park and Rec all those years, and all the programs I've done, even trying for my own teams, trying to get coaches. It's been harder
Sure.
to get coaches to come coach.
For sure.
And it's not necessarily that they don't want to do it, but the dynamics have changed. I think
Umpires feel the same way.
yeah. Oh, trust me. I mean, we're paying for softball for an hour game. We were having to pay $70 and $80 for one umpire.
Right.
And these umps said, "Hey, I don't want to. It's not worth doing it for
Yep.
more than less than that.
Yep.
My time,
Gas. Yep.
and also putting up with the arguments and the coaches and the parents. And
Absolutely.
I mean, expectations are so different now.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
are.
I get coaches saying, I don't want to coach. I don't want to deal with the parents. I don't want to,
Yep.
I don't want to deal with kids not coming to practices, and I don't want to deal with umpires, and there's so much conflict out there now too.
Mhm.
People are more willing to, there's more animosity. I think people are, they're maybe they're unhappy with their lives and their jobs, or
You can see it on the freeway.
making ends meet, and I think the pressure, and so they come to games and they come to practice, they take it out on the coach, or they take it out on the umpire,
Yeah.
or their kid, or somebody else's kid, or
I feel so fortunate. The culture that we have right now, at least, I can only speak for year by year, but it's not like that. It's pretty positive. I mean, everyone's got their their opinions or whatever, but for the most part, they tend to separate pretty good.
Right.
That's a culture that you have to build over time. And I think like that recognition you're talking about. I think as coaches, if you do that on a daily basis, you recognize guys for their effort,
Right.
whether it be in a small way or in front of the group, then maybe at the end of the whole rainbow, you don't have to hand that trophy out because that kid knows he's valued.
Yeah.
And we truly try to stress valuing the guy that's the least experienced and maybe the least contributory in the program to the best guy, and
Right.
treat them the same way as long as they're all working hard. So make it more character based than performance. Obviously, performance is going to get them on the field,
Right.
and that's what they all want that. So
Sure.
yeah, it's kind of it's
Yeah.
a balance. But I think to some degree, I feel as though kids get a bad rap, and I'm not saying that to be politically correct, but I do feel like you know kids are a byproduct of their environment. They're a byproduct of their history. They're a byproduct of their parents' history to some degree.
Right.
So I think sometimes they get a little bit too much blame. And I think in a lot of ways they're more intelligent than when we were young. I think stupid worked for us a little bit in some
Yeah.
cases, but I also know that there was some dark things about our era too that over time you tend to forget. The good old days, and yet there was a lot of bad times in
Yeah.
the late '60s,
No,
early
and I
'70s.
agree. Like
So
I said, I think it's so much harder now to grow up. To be
social
a
media
kid. I mean,
alone is the
Just,
dynamic.
I
Yeah,
mean,
my
these
goodness.
kids are, there's so much more that they are dealing with than we didn't have to deal with. So I agree
Absolutely.
with you. And I want to make it clear. I've been so fortunate because, obviously I've been doing this a long time, and I wouldn't have been doing this as long as I have if I was having issues. I've been blessed through the years
But it's a culture
with
you've built.
great parents
You have that
and
expectation.
great kids. I mean, so when me bringing some of these things up, I'm not necessarily saying I'm dealing with it,
Yep.
but I have friends that are in the coaching profession,
And you see it.
the society in general.
Absolutely.
But I must say, Burbank people, for the most part, I don't have those issues. I
Yeah.
mean, these parents they understand. Like I said, I have kids that are playing multiple sports. They do the best they can to get them to
I think
our
a lot of it goes to your credibility.
And,
I mean, when they know you're credible as a coach, they're a lot less likely to step out of those bounds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think
And again, we're not perfect.
No,
I mean, I'm not
absolutely
perfect.
not.
I make, I'm sure I make decisions out there that aren't right,
Absolutely.
or I should have played this kid more. I should have done this. I should have done that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm human. We're all going to make mistakes.
And you want your team to be humble. So if
Right.
we're not humble, what are we
Right.
doing?
And I tell my kids every day, I say, hey, it's okay to make a mistake.
Yep.
The biggest thing is try to learn from it and move on.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, I make mistakes every day.
I've given kids the wrong sign at third base with 2 outs. I'm giving him hit and run. He's looking at me like, what the hell?
No, I call a play. I call a play in the football game sometimes. What am I doing? I think,
Yeah.
but later, why did I call that play, or why didn't I play so and so in that position, or
Hindsight.
what was I doing? But that's what you do. I mean, when you're having to make that decision on the fly, you don't have that luxury to sit in the stands and say, okay, he should do this or she should do
Hindsight
that.
is undefeated.
So, but hey, we're in it. We're still doing it. So that tells you something. We must love
Absolutely.
what we're doing, right?
Absolutely.
And like I said, I do it for the kids. I don't,
Yep.
I don't do it for the parents. I do it for the kids.
Yeah,
And I do
absolutely.
it, and just to see the look on their faces, and not every experience is great,
Yeah.
but that's how you learn. That's how you grow up.
Sure.
Like I tell them, life isn't always going to be roses. It's,
Yeah.
there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be some things that are unfair. It's life, and you have to learn that. And I learned that. I still learn it, I mean,
It's also perception because I remember I told my wife one time I was so disappointed because I ran into a former player And you could kind of tell he was like, whatever, coach, hey, how's it going? And then you'll run into guys who will hug you, and
Yeah.
call you on Thanksgiving and
Sure.
Christmas,
Sure.
So sometimes you think you've made that connection, and in actuality, you may not have made that connection.
No,
And
exactly.
then other times you're not aware of the connection you made because it wasn't so overt. And then later on you go, wow, I
Yeah.
mean, that kid really cared about our program.
Yeah.
And we gave him a great ride. And that's kind of the focus for us is the great ride
Yeah.
because there's 5 or 6 CIF champions, and that doesn't make everyone else a loser. If you create a great experience for them, build a team that they can remember, it's good stuff,
Well, I think I don't know. I'm sure both you guys can say this too. One of the satisfactions for me for coaching is just seeing these young people grow up and mature into awesome adults. And I'm sure it's happened with you guys.
Weddings.
I'll go to a market or I'll be at a restaurant and somebody will come up to me and say, "Hey, you were my Pee Wee sports teacher at Verdugo Park in 1986. I
Yeah.
remember playing basketball."
Yep.
And then I'll say, "Hey, bud, what's up?"
Right.
And later on,
And you have no idea who they are,
Yeah.
what their name
yeah,
is.
Julie will go, "You didn't know their name, did you?" And I said, "Well, how do you know?" She goes, "Because you always say, 'What's up, bud?'"
Yeah.
But yet this kid will remember you.
For sure.
And that's why now I try to tell my young coaches, my assistant coaches, or if I hire a coach to coach for me, I say, always remember how you treat these kids because they'll remember you the rest of their life,
For sure.
and you never know. I mean, I was working for a principal for many years that wound up I had him as a 7th grader
Mhm.
on one of my teams.
Yep.
And then he wound up being my boss,
Yep.
15 years later or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, you don't know, and again, these kids will remember everything you say to them, and so, it's
Later on, maybe not right away.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, let's get a little more into with that in mind, team loyalties. I think it's something that we're seeing more, or I should say less and less of, that now kids are not playing for their local high school. College now, you have the transfer portals. Pros, you have the free agency, and you don't have the loyalty to your team anymore that you used to have. And I think it starts with high school.
Yeah.
How many transfers do you see? And the CIF says you can't do that, but they're not stopping it in any way because they're scared of litigation.
Right.
So when these kids are moving school to school every year, are they really doing it is there a team element there, or is it completely an individual element, do you think?
Yeah, it as a coach, sometimes it does get frustrating, especially at the upper levels, obviously, when you're in high school and stuff. But even at the levels I coach at, I see it. I mean, we always want our kid, hey, play for your school, you take pride in your school. You're only going to go to school once in your lifetime. And, but yet they'll play travel ball or they'll play club ball, and that kind of deal. So, obviously we have to do a better job of making it more enticing for them to play for a particular school or particular team. And as like at Burroughs or Burbank or Providence or Bell Jeff, I was fortunate enough, I coached at all 4 of those schools at some point, and I saw it at all 4 of those schools. If parents weren't happy, and that was, even back in the day, if parents weren't happy with the program or with, they would leave and go to another school, Whereas when I went to Burroughs, I mean, my parents would never take me out because of sports, especially.
Well, let's go into one. I happened to write this down, or I cut this out the other day from Twitter, and you're a big UCLA fan, like Coach Hart is, and Mick Cronin was quoted as saying, Mick Cronin is the basketball coach at UCLA. For those who don't know. It says here, Mick Cronin on the problem with youth basketball in America. And his quote is, "The biggest problem with basketball in this country is it's tied with scholastics, where everywhere else it's not. It's playing for your club," which really, I had to scratch my head saying, here is a college coach saying that our system in America is not good because our kids have to go to school and play basketball, where in other countries, they just play basketball all day. And in clubs and everything else. And to me, that was it was an anti-education type statement that we're doing it wrong. I mean, that's your guy there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about that, to be honest. Obviously these kids are getting full rides to go to UCLA or USC or Duke or Carolina, and to play basketball.
Yeah, but how about these kids who only go there for 1 year because they have to because the NBA
and then
forces them?
or they leave. They're good enough and they leave. Um, I mean, I use an example: USC's quarterback Caleb Williams. I mean, he wants a cut in the ownership. I mean, where have you heard of a college player ever saying that I'll sign with a team that gives me part ownership? I mean, that's what I'm saying. It is so out of control, and
Yeah.
it's just mind boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Become Magic Johnson first, and then you can own
yeah, I mean,
teams.
get to the NBA before but again, can you blame him? I mean, if he's being allowed to do that, if our society's basically saying, hey, you can, ask for what you want, then you can't blame these guys for doing it. I mean, it's easy for people to criticize, oh, he's only gonna he left after 1 year. But hey, if somebody's dangling millions of dollars in my face, I'm gonna probably go too.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. You can't be a hypocrite. And I mean, there's a lot of money being dangled in front of these players.
Well, and they know. I mean, can you imagine Magic playing for the Celtics because he decided he wanted to win a ring?
Yeah.
Those things didn't really happen much. So
Right. No, exactly.
I think a lot of that has to do with I want a ring because I know a ring is going to make me a bigger contract.
Right.
Everyone wants to be associated with success.
Sure.
So that's why when a program does well in high school, college, whatever, it's a little easier for them to get people because
Right.
people want to be associated with success, however they perceive that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not as obvious as what you might think.
Right. Well, tell me if I'm wrong too, but Burroughs and Burbank, for example, they have to take pretty much the kids in their area, whereas to an extent.
Well, I think that's a fallacy. I think there's a lot of kids who don't live in Burbank who
Well,
go
I
to
know there's
schools,
ways.
and there's
Yeah.
it's very simple to
Yeah.
have-
But I mean, for the most part,
It used to be that way. Now it's open enrollment.
But isn't it for the most part, most of the kids that go to Burroughs and Burbank live in Burbank? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I.
yeah, oh yeah. I would say
I mean,
I would
I
say
would say
probably
most, yeah.
80%.
Whereas the big Catholic schools or the private schools, they're obviously they can get kids from all over.
Well, a
So,
basic misconception is that the CIF is this huge entity who can go around investigating all these different programs, when in actuality they mandate that to each school to supervise and
Right.
police.
Self-report.
So, yeah, it's a self-report. So as interested as your administration is to make sure that everything's dotted and crossed, that's the extent of which you're going to be looked at.
Sure.
Yeah, because the schools also know that if they have a winning football team or basketball team, more kids want to come to school, and in a private school that means more money coming in,
Sure.
and they're competing for athletes.
Well, they get more
yeah.
publicity for the school and
Sure, everyone loves to be associated with winning.
and in that puts pressure on the coaches.
I've been very
know.
fortunate in my tenure that I've had
Yeah.
great people above me who never had that expectation.
Right.
They wanted kids to graduate. They wanted kids to have a good experience, not be beaten down by the process. Of course, you want to win because that winning takes care of so many different peripheral
Problems,
issues.
Yeah,
for
you're very
sure.
lucky. You've always had administrators who are ex-athletes or sports people. Where I had a situation where
Or they just
not
get
one
it.
administrator had any sports knowledge whatsoever and would just listen to what the parents say, and that would be okay. We'll just go by that. And
Yeah.
that's for a coach. It's a death sentence.
Matters who supports you, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's get on to something a little. Let's finish up here with something a little more about Mike Graceffo here. We know you're a big memorabilia guy, and I remember the days we used to go to Angel games back in the '80s when they were in their heyday. And after the game, Mike let's go get autographs, and we would chase players around. I remember Mike running after Nolan Ryan in his car. He'd go up to Rod Carew or Reggie Jackson every time, and Rod Carew said, "Didn't I just sign for you yesterday?" And, yeah, but today's today, and so you've always been a memorabilia guy. You've always liked that kind of thing, and now you've gone on to kind of run a business and sell things and
Yeah.
how's that all going?
It's sort of funny because the way that started was when you and I worked at Dodger Stadium. We'd run into, remember in the elevator, we'd run into
Yep.
Ron Sayer, Steve Garvey, or Lopes, because it was that team. That was the team
Actually,
we
my
were
biggest thrill there was, we worked for Danny Goodman Enterprises who
Yeah.
did the souvenirs. And at the start of a homestand, they used to have a program just for that homestand.
right.
And we would, I would always somehow be the one to take the case of programs down to the visitors clubhouse, and I got to go in the clubhouse and put the programs, box in there, and I'd look around and see all the players, and the big red machine and all those guys, and what a thrill that was back
I
then.
remember we literally would get stuff like the players. I think I got a cracked helmet from Steve Garvey once, or and that's how I started in the hobby, basically, and then obviously fortunate enough to work with Michael Jordan in the camps and being able to meet him and get his signatures, and I just love sports. And we would a friend of mine that I've known forever, lived in Burbank and coached in Burbank, Lance Alexander, was a diehard Dr. J fan and 76er fan. We literally bought tickets to the sighting game when they swept the Lakers. We're on our way to the Forum. We get a flat tire. We get to the game, saw the Sixers beat the Lakers, 4 games. We literally went to the Stouffer Hotel after that game. They were all celebrating there, all the Sixers, and we literally went up the elevator, got into Dr. J's room. He was sitting on the bed smoking a cigar. There were probably 150 fans in there with him.
That's great.
And we were in there. I tell people, they don't believe me.
That's awesome.
I tell people, I took Ricky Henderson. He came out of the Angel Stadium and he was looking for some girl. He had me riding him around the stadium. I had a little Toyota Tercel, driving around and around the stadium. I had a couple buddies with me. They were sitting in the back asking him to sign cards, and we were laughing.
You probably told people, I run faster than your damn car
going
goes.
around and around the stadium. Finally, he had us take him back to the hotel. I tell people, they don't believe me. No way you met Rick. I mean, I could tell you so many stories. Don Mattingly buying us a drink at the old Marriott Hotel by Disneyland. That's where the Yankees used to stay. Because he yelled at us right when they got off the bus. They came from Oakland, and they had lost a series, and Steinbrenner was in one of his modes and made some comments that hit the press. So when they got off the bus, there was like 10 of us there, and we were asking Manley for his autograph. He yelled at everybody. He said, "Leave me alone." So anyway, whatever. We left him alone. We go in there to have a sandwich and a drink, and they had a little, like a restaurant in the Marriott. All of a sudden, just like that old commercial where they buy you the drink, this lady comes up and brings, I'm with 3 other people, brings us 4 drinks. And we go, "We didn't order these drinks." And she points to the guy over there, and it was Don Mattingly, and he gave us a little heads up.
Nice.
I tell people, they don't believe me. They don't believe the story about the Coliseum. When we ran on the field with Don Shula. But it's all true, So, yeah, I've been really fortunate through the years of just getting to meet, I don't know, I just happen to be sometimes in the right place at the right time, and I get to meet like famous people, it's sometimes where you find out they're going to be there and you go to meet them. But to be honest, Henry Winkler was on a flight. I was coming back from Chicago. He was on the same plane.
Yeah.
So there's
Susie and I always say that you guys should be, because we follow you on Facebook a little bit. We always say you should be on The Amazing Race. I mean, you go country to country, you're through the airports.
No, I swear, it's just being sometimes in the right place at the right time, and that's how I get to meet these people.
Living life.
Just going places.
Living life, man.
I met Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently. My friend called me and says, "Hey, come to he's speaking at something," and we went, and I met him. Now here's a guy, I don't know if he's going to win, but he's running for president of the United States.
In fact, you and I were both at my house the night that Robert Kennedy got assassinated.
I know.
We were both here that night and went through that.
Yeah, it's pretty traumatic,
Everybody remembers where they were on that night.
Yeah, and my mom told me stories about JFK. She loved him, and stuff. So, but yeah, I've just been really fortunate. Like I said, through the years, I've met President Ford, believe it or not. I met Bill Clinton. I mean, what are the odds of meeting people like that?
Yep.
My aunt worked at the old Sheraton Hotel in the gift shop. She would call me and say, "Hey, Michael Jackson's staying in the hotel. He just came into the gift shop and bought this or that. And why don't you come and hang out?" I'd go hang out with my aunt, and she'd introduce me to all these famous people.
Yeah.
I met the Notre Dame football team. I've just been really fortunate and really lucky. We went to an Angel minor league game, and Mike Trout was a minor leaguer. And they were doing for the Ronald McDonald House. They were raffling off jerseys.
Did you meet Ronald?
No, I didn't meet Ronald, but I met Mike Trout. And so I walk up to this thing, and I go, "Hey, who's the best player on this team?" I had no idea. The guy goes, "Let me tell you, Sonny, It's this guy, number 23, Mike Trout, because that's what he wore with the Quakes. So I bid on his jersey, and I guess the winner, you got to line up in the 8th inning down the field, the line, and then after the game, they take you onto the field. He takes the jersey off his back that he was wearing, signs it for you. So every other Quake player was $60, $70. I wound up bidding on Mike Trout because this usher told me he's the best player on the team at that time. Oh. I paid like $380 for it. Julie's like, "What are you doing? Why are you spending that kind of money?" I go, "It's a good cause." And I wind up getting this game-used jersey off Mike Trout.
That's great.
You know, he signed it and everything.
Okay,
you know,
now,
so
do you still have that today?
I do not have that today. I traded it a year later for a Larry Bird, Dr. J, Magic Johnson rookie card.
I have one.
You have that card?
I have that card.
I traded it for that, understanding still a year later, nobody really knew what Mike Trout was going to do.
Right.
Now do you realize if I had that jersey? I do have a photo that Mike signed for me with me and him and the jersey, though. But I don't have the jersey.
Hey, watch this, Coach. Do you still have that card that you traded for?
I still have the card.
Oh, okay. Well,
I do have the card.
I always wish Salmon and Trout had played together.
Yeah.
You know?
There you go.
Yeah.
But no,
I've been Carlton Fish.
I love
fish.
I love
They're
sports.
swimming upstream, I think.
I love sports, and I've just been really fortunate through the years of just being able to, to meet some really famous people.
I feel the same way with my wife. I mean, just right time, right spot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just in the, the stars align.
I mean, I met Corey Seager, tonight's MVP. But the funny thing is with these people is when they get right down to it, they're just like us.
For sure.
They're very nice, even Michael Jordan. I mean, he was very friendly. He'd call me California Kid or,
Yeah.
He was cool. I mean, they're normal people.
Burbank, Lake, in fact, we were at our pre-production unit. We saw Bruce Valanche, a writer, walk in. Yeah. And to me, the actors and stuff, they're just. But to me, an athlete, that's something that's special. That's anybody can be an actor, as athletes will prove.
Right.
But there's no actor who could just be an athlete. That's a special breed.
I feel that way about nurses and doctors at Children's Hospital.
Exactly.
Like, how come we don't stand up?
No, you're right.
Yeah. Those people are standing.
You're right. There's something wrong with our. Yeah, when you're worshiping athletes and movie stars instead of nurses and doctors.
We got teachers that dedicate their lives.
And teachers. Yeah. I live with one. So
exactly.
And that goes back to the old day, even now, where private schools are paying their football and basketball coaches more than they're paying their AP teachers. Which you figure that out.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
So, well, Coach, you got anything else for us tonight?
No, I'm good. Good to see you guys.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You guys, I consider you guys both really good friends, and known you guys for a long time. We coached basketball teams against each other and with each other, and same with Craig and I. We've coached together, played on teams together back in the day, and the old Burbank Cubs, if I recall, baseball, and had some great times together, and gone to a lot of sporting events together, and
absolutely,
that's what to me. The one thing getting back to sports is the memories. I mean, like you say, I don't remember whether I won a championship but I remember the outings. I remember being at my friends' houses and having those team dinners, and even as a coach, I mean, you remember the team parties, and when the parents all had took us out to Shakey's, and those are the things you remember. It
accumulates to even like moments like now. I mean, this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
Sports.
No, I agree. And like I said, I've been blessed even now. I mean, I have great parents and kids, and so it makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely.
It makes it worthwhile.
Good to see you, Craig.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the show. For our second show, pretty good. Our first guest of.
Not too grumpy.
Not too grumpy.
I hope we weren't grumpy, you guys.
Not too grumpy.
Right?
Well, I'm sure we'll get our reviews from the public, but that's okay. You know what? I enjoyed it. It's good reminiscing.
Being around kids every day, and I'm around all ages every day, you have to stay young at heart. Believe me, because they'll let you know if you're not.
For sure.
Can I close with one thing?
Sure.
Again, this was something really cool at one of my schools that I work at. Obviously, it was Halloween yesterday, and I was on campus. And one of my athletes, he actually dressed up as me. He wore, a bright yellow shirt, the blue shorts, had Air Force Ones on,
nice.
Black low socks. He actually had 2 tattoos, one Yankee one on his one ankle, the Michael Jordan Jumpman one on the other, and he dressed just like me. And I mean, I thought that was like the
That's
coolest thing, you
That's
know.
great.
And so it's stuff like that that makes
Impact, man.
it all
Yeah,
worthwhile,
for sure.
you know. And you hope you're making a positive impact on these kids. Like I said, we're not perfect. We make mistakes, you know.
Yep.
But
Well, yeah,
we're-
it's
you know,
not the, you know,
and,
if anything, we call that the paycheck because
Yeah.
we don't get paid much
no,
money.
it's, the money's
That's
not
the
worth
paycheck right there.
the time and
Yeah.
the, you know.
I call coaching the perfect imperfection because, you know, if
Yeah.
you're not getting better, you're probably getting worse.
No, exactly.
Okay, well, I think that's it for show number 2. We hope you enjoyed it. Mike, thank you for coming on the show, and Coach, we will get back to everybody again in a couple weeks for another edition of Coach's Corner. So until then, thank you very much.
My Burbank Talks would like to thank all of My Burbank's advertisers for their continued support. Burbank Water and Power, Cusimano Real Estate Group, UME Credit Union, the Burbank Chamber of Commerce, Gain Credit Union, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, Community Chevrolet, Media City Credit Union, UCLA Health, Tequila's Cantina and Grill, UPS Store on 3rd Street, and Hill Street Cafe.